All right. Thank you everyone so much for coming to our job seeker prep class, the first session with Joana Donovan. Tonight we're doing resumes, cover letters, and portfolio building. So glad you could be here for the first event in the series. Just a quick overview of our agenda. We just had our networking time from 6:30 to 7. Don't think that means you can't continue chatting. We will be keeping an eye on the chat throughout the presentation or afterwards. We are always happy to hear from you. So glad you could join us so far and happy to see how things continue. We're just going over a little bit of welcome and announcements, introducing our presenter, and then Joanna's going to take it away with her presentation and then leave some time for Q&A. So we know we got some questions already submitted, but I'm sure some will come up as we go. So my name is Bethany Aguad. I will say every time I'm notorious for forgetting to introduce myself. So if you've been speaking to me for the last 30 minutes, I'm glad you could see my name on Zoom. I just get all excited to talk to people. I am the president of the Florida chapter of the Society for Technical Communication. So we are hosting this event, much like we host regular monthly events. They're educational for technical communicators or people who are interested in any of the theory and practice of any sort of writing skill. And we are gathering from not just across Florida, but often beyond. As we know, we have folks in other states. We're always happy to see you. So Florida is meant to be inclusive, not exclusive, for people who are joining from other locations. So we do these monthly. We also have some other events I'll mention coming up, but thank you for being here with us. So a little bit of news. I'm not going to give you the hard sell on STC membership, but we are part of the Society for Technical Communication, which is the professional society for technical communicators, which sounds like a tongue twister, but I think I got it out right this time. And membership runs through from beginning of year to the end of the year. So if you are either a member who is looking to renew or you're someone who's looking to join, membership is now open for 2024. And if you do join, we hope you'll also join the STC Florida chapter as your community. If you would like more information on that, let me know. I will put my email in the chat. Also, Julia is here with me, and we are both on the STC account. So if you see, we're not totally sure if it's going to show whose name is who's in the chat, but we'll try to keep track of it. So that's for me. Feel free to reach out to me if you have anything along the way. Thanks, Jessica, for putting the STC membership link as well. I'm going to hand it to Julia real quick, just for a little bit about writing from memo to members.
Hey, I'm Julia Southwick, the STC Florida Vice President, Communications Chair, and Newsletter Editor. We're always looking to publish TechCom-related articles in our newsletter, which is run more like a blog, memo to members. If you want to write for us, send me an email, and if you're not sure what to write, I have an ideas page for that, and I'll put that in chat for you.
All right, thanks, Julia. So another thing, we have these meetings and some other sessions we do, but if you're looking to stay in touch between meetings, chat, ask questions, share things you're working on, we do have a Discord server. So that's got a variety of channels on different topics. You're welcome to message, share, post. We have a pets channel. I don't post all 7 of my cats. I promise. I'm quite restrained. But if you ask for pictures, I will deliver them, if that interests you. And if you ask for no pictures, that's also okay. And you can avoid seeing my many, many cats, except Emma, who will appear on camera at some point, whether I want her to or not. But yeah, that's our way to stay in touch in between meetings. And we're always happy to see new folks there. So just a quick reminder for these job seeker prep class sessions. Today on the 19th, we have resume, cover letters, and portfolio building. I think many of you also RSVP'd for the next 2 sessions. So next week we have LinkedIn content strategies, job searching, and networking. And then the last on November 2nd is interview preparation. For those next 2 meetings, those do start later at 7:30. So normally we do our monthly event, which includes like welcome from people like me and Julia. But after the next 2 sessions will be really driven by Joanna. So she'll be able to really dive even more into that content. And just a quick note on some other upcoming meetings. If you are interested in volunteering or learning more about what STC Florida is about, we do have our administrative council meetings. That's for our elected officers, committee chairs, and other volunteers. That's open to anyone. And that's on November 9th if you're interested. My email's there. Let me know. We also have our virtual networking meetings. Those are every month. They're open to anyone. You can just join. We chat, TechCom. Mostly we stay away from current events and focus on, just sort of what's going on, who's going through work problems, who's looking for a job, that kind of thing. And then we're going to plan our next event on November 16th. We'll be announcing what the topic is for that meeting very soon, but that'll be an educational program from our chapter. So if you want to spend more time with us, there are lots of opportunities in the next month. And since I know we have this as a job seekers prep class, in addition to what Joanna is going to be covering with specific advice, I also want to mention a couple other things. We do have Nicole with us, who is our employment chair. She posts jobs all the time on LinkedIn. I highly recommend connecting with her and following her posts. And she's also just a great resource and person to talk to if you're looking for advice. Also, STC has a job bank, so that's not from our chapter, but from STC at large, that has job postings. You can post your resume if you want to see some more, career opportunities beyond what we share. There's also an STC Slack, so that's open as a server for anyone to join, and there's some channels there for people who are posting for job opportunities. I would say probably every couple of weeks or so there's an opportunity shared. So if you're just looking for more resources and places to go, that's one of them. And then last, I want to say, please do network with us. Not all of us are offering jobs right now, but we tend to, try to help people find something that's going to be a good fit for them. We know it's a tough job market and we want to do what we can. And, please feel free to reach out to us or join for our networking meetings. Because even on our last networking meeting, Julia shared that she has a job that they are hiring for. So if you are looking to connect with people, please join us. You know where to find us. And I already mentioned Nicole, but I wanted to also include Nicole's email. So I did want to ask, I guess, if anyone's willing to share in the chat, is there anyone who is currently hiring for a job or looking for a job that would be, someone who'd want to follow up with? Feel free, guys, if you want to mention the chat if you're a job seeker or if you're just exploring what's out there. Yeah, we have some people who are always looking. That's probably pretty wise in our current environment. Okay, yeah, please feel free to post those and we'll make sure to follow up with you and see what we can do to help. Beyond the amazing advice you're about to get in this session. So I want to introduce tonight's presenter, expert, and panelist of one. Let me spotlight Joanna's video just to make sure everyone's seeing it. No Zoom is going to stop you. So Joana Donovan is a career services professional, and she has her own business, Propel Resume and Career Services. I know some of our members have used her services to get their resumes up to date for the job search. And we're looking forward to her sharing her expertise. And she does have her contact info in upcoming slides, but I don't know if there's anything else, Joanna, you wanted me to cover before I hand it over to you.
Nope, I think that's great. Thank you.
All right, then let me stop screen sharing and we'll hope the screen share is going to be cooperative.
Yes, we'll hope so. Let's go ahead and just share my screen. And this one. The tech gods are working. Fantastic. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight and taking the time to go through the job seeker prep class with me. I want to first thank everyone at STC who approached me to do this workshop. I think it's super relevant, whether you're in TechCom or not. And I was very honored to be asked to do this. I am a TechCom STC member, and I do have some background, but I think the conversation is pretty open to everyone, whether you're in TechCom or not, which is sort of why we opened it up on LinkedIn to people beyond the membership. And perhaps this will draw some folks to the membership. But essentially, we're going to do a deep dive into a 3-part series here. Tonight will be focused on resume writing and portfolio building and everything that kind of is in between. And then we'll get into the heavier topics as we go on in the next couple of weeks. Oops, let me go back. So a little bit about me. I am Joana Donovan, and I am originally from New York. I am living here in sunny South Florida, and I'm thankful not to have to deal with the snow. And while I've been down here for the last 20 plus years, I have built up my career from basically ground zero to what I'm doing today. And it didn't take a path of a straight line like most folks who are navigating their career. I've been in corporate America 25 plus years. We won't have to go around the right number or the correct number, but it's enough to have gotten my feet wet in real estate, sales, property management, construction, and a bunch of other different industries, which helps when I'm writing for people, especially at this juncture. But it's been fun to navigate different industries. You get to see how the other half lives and understand how the processes work, whether you're on the bottom rung or you've moved up the ladder. It definitely adds a little color to what the processes and practices of others are. So I find that it was a unique opportunity to morph into this writing profession that I'm in now with that background. During the day, I work for a institutional finance company. So I do that, and that kind of keeps me grounded in corporate America. So I'm still very much involved. I'm not strictly doing writing, and that really gives me some inside track on what's going on in the world and how the job market's going. So that kind of lends a little bit of the credibility side of what I do. Then at night and on the weekends and anywhere in between where I'm not asleep, I am writing resumes for all ages, all career levels. No matter what it is, I'm there. And if I can't do it, I have a list of cohorts that might specialize in a particular area, especially if you're looking for like straight on coaching or that kind of assistance. Most recently, I graduated from the University of Central Florida with my bachelor's in English with the specialty track in technical communications. Some of the members of STC went to UCF with me. We were in similar classes, and we'll kind of talk about that a little bit further down into the discussion tonight. But it kind of also gives me that inside track on what's happening with folks that are coming out of college or who are in college. I know exactly what happened before we went into the pandemic, what classroom assignments look like during pandemic and afterwards. And that insight definitely helps me navigate or guide the younger crowd as to what their next move might be, giving them advice that perhaps their guidance counselors are not providing or their career counselors in college are not helping them with. So having that hybrid ability of knowing what's going on for the last 20 plus years and then knowing what the kids are going through gives me a broader range to deal with a lot of different folks, which is really fun. In addition, as part of being STC, I was last year one of 2 scholarship winners, which was really exciting. I had a lot of fun writing the essay and getting recognized. I don't really win a lot of things, so that was really fun. And on top of that, I was recognized by a few of the professors at UCF for some of the work that I did project-wise, and we'll look at that in just a little bit. I only did snapshots of them, not full on deep on the projects, but you'll get a sense of what we worked on, and it'll help us with the conversation on portfolio building. I am a certified professional resume writer from PARC, which is the Professional Association of Resume Writers and Career Coaches. And I also have from the same organization a certification in digital career strategy, which helps me with the LinkedIn profiles. I am a member, as I said earlier, of STC and of the Professional Association of the Resume Writers. So essentially, I came into this with the notion of helping folks. And I kind of skipped over the slide because you've seen this a minute ago, but basically I'm here to help just about everyone. I know as much as I can based on the folks that I've worked with, and I continue to learn. I continue to try and figure out how to help others, no matter what industry they're in or what platform or what stage of their career they are in. I've helped people in high school all the way up to moms and dads who are trying to get back into the workforce after 10, 15, 20 years of being stay at home with their children, and or maybe even helping an elderly member of their family. So it definitely lends itself to having some creative writing, to having some insights as to what the challenges are in today's market. So tonight we're going to go over the content of trends and statistics, careers, some HR trends. We're going to talk about the resume and cover letter building. We're going to talk about ATS. There'll be some discussions about ChatGPT, portfolio building, and then there'll be some time at the end for Q&A. So I'm going to ask, as we go through the presentation, please put your questions and comments in chat. I'll be happy to address them at the end. I think we'll get through the program a little faster, and then I can spend some quality time with all of you at the end with any questions you might have. And then if you are able to stay till the very end, there's some bonus footage that I'd like to share that could be beneficial to one or all of you. So hopefully you'll be able to stick around till the end. All right, let's get into the trends and statistics. So does this describe anyone's current situation? You can put it in the chat. I saw this in a recent meeting and I thought this is quite clever. It really speaks to a lot of different perspectives. And I wondered if anybody felt this way looking at this particular picture, because it has pros and cons. Basically, you can look at it as you're hanging off that cliff just as much as it's showing you, but it could also say that you're a risk taker. You're looking to jump in there. You're looking to do something different. There's a lot of different ways of interpreting this photo. This picture is really a picture of your life. You really have to embrace the ultimate possibilities that you could have in your career or over your life, no matter what you're doing. So if you look at this as that kind of situation of half glass full and empty kind of perspective, there's a lot of different things that you can do. And so it doesn't always have to look like you're hanging off that cliff. So I wanted to kind of do a little fun recap. Some of us will know what this is, some of us will not. I thought it was kind of fun to just kind of look at the different ways that we were embracing trends back when I was a kid and when I was, in my early adulthood. And we all know what it looks like now. But in the 70s, your resume had to include your age and your weight. I'm sure nobody wants to do that anymore. You used to put a lot of personal details. And I will say that I think some people, at least in the European countries, are still sort of putting that down on their resumes, which is really interesting. They'll even put down where their parents were born. I'm not really sure what purpose that serves, but it is something that's culturally accepted. In the 80s, we were into all the shoulder pads and colorful suits. It was very much the Don Johnson and Miami Vice kind of look. But again, in those eras, there were no computers. There was no quick way to be able to research like we do today. In the 90s, we were only just getting into the computers, but we also started getting into job boards and people really finding still their job opportunities through ads in the paper. Or if you have a penny saver in your neighborhood, you talk to a friend, that was really how you did it. Nowadays, it's different. We have this wonderful invention called the internet, and we definitely have the details at our disposal. And one of those great details that we can get every month is the market conditions. And so here in front of us is the September jobs market. A lot of us have probably already seen this, but it really kind of gives you a snapshot as to how the market has been growing, what changes. And there's a lot of things that are cyclical based on the industries that you're in. So I think when reading some of these job condition reports, you really have to take it with a grain of salt, because a lot of it may not pertain to what you do professionally. There might be heavier industries that are looking for more people because they just, let's say, your tradesmen. There are a lot of people that don't want to work with their hands. They don't want to learn a trade. And those areas are looking for more help than maybe perhaps in our tech comm or in maybe healthcare or some of the other sectors. So especially now in the September numbers, there are a lot of transitions. Kids are going back to school. People took off for the summer. So all those factor into the prior months, as well as what has shown up for the September jobs market report. But definitely need to kind of watch that as you try and interpret it in the best way to find out how the market is doing. Workforce statistics. So as of 2023, there are 5 generations in the workplace. You have your traditionalists, your baby boomers, Generation X, millennials, and Generation Z or Gen Z. This is the most amount that we have had in any job force that we have recorded. And it's kind of interesting because everyone's take about what the ideal work situation is very, very different. And I think that it's very important to know, in order for all of us to work under the same umbrella, we have to understand everyone else's perspectives. And that's the only way that we're going to work harmoniously, whether we're doing a, complete remote work, hybrid work, whether or not we want to work a full day, however that looks, there has to be some element of give and take to be able to work harmoniously together. But there are some stressors that are happening in the market. And I'm not saying that this is something that's new, but this is what has been recorded as of late, that there are excessive workloads because there is so much job movement. Or in the case of the companies, especially like a Salesforce or a Citrix, who laid off mass amounts of people, there were a lot of shifts in how much work the remaining employees received. A lot of them did not get compensated for that shift. And so there is excessive workloads that are being navigated right now. My office is one of them. There is unrealistic expectations from a boss. Now, that's not every job. I think that there are a lot of very favorable people out there who are treating their employees in the right manner, but there are some exceptions to the rule. So I feel that there is a lot to improve on in the marketplace. And perhaps as we get out of this post-pandemic situation, that we're going to find some normalization as to what that new work looks like. And then, of course, there's a lot of ambiguity around the job roles and expectations, which I'm sure a lot of you are seeing if you're in the workforce. And it's because we're still navigating. I think the bosses have just as much to worry about, but also we're moving at such a fast pace that it's very difficult in some sectors to keep up, especially if you want to talk about, let's say, IT. IT is moving at such a quick pace that you're always shifting where people are doing things. And I think in my office alone, someone was given a task that they had, although we're in IT, had no idea how to do. And so that's when you have to be adaptable and really kind of figure out who can you work with in the office to get that done. And there's a lot of conversation that has to be had. A lot of communication has to happen in order to mitigate those situations. So I imagine that there's still going to be some shifting going on and some of that ambiguity in the future. But I like to notice that some of these percentages of hybrid, mostly in the office for Gen Z, 45, there's 43%, 45% for millennials, and Gen X is, remote only 62%. I think those numbers are kind of funky, but it kind of gives you a snapshot of what and how people are feeling these days. All right, we're going to take a deep dive into the careers. And a lot of people have, when they come to me for help, are in a space where they're tired of what they're doing. I'll use mortgage people as a prime example because they've had a lot of change in the last couple of years. They were considered essential and then suddenly had the rug ripped out of them from underneath them. And a lot of them, that's all they ever did. They came right out of high school. They don't see themselves as anyone else. And the whole idea of trying to figure out who they want to be becomes a problem because they just don't know. But a lot of it has to start, whether you're in mortgages or some other field, you have to know who you are. And that's where the branding comes in. And I believe we had a guest speaker last week or the week before, Bethany, that discussed branding. And I'm sure that they went into a deep dive as to their perspective on how to do that. Everyone has a different take on it, and no one is wrong. I think you just have to figure out what the right fit is for you. Just like when you're going to work with a company or work with a resume coach or anyone in the job sector, you're going to want to make sure it's a good fit. So the only way you can do that is to figure out who you are. You want to figure out what your interests and skills and values are. What do you bring to the table? And how do you take that and turn that into something that's fulfilling? So for instance, if your personal brand is centered around being a creative person or you like innovation, perhaps you're going to look in the arts or technology or other qualities that are valued in those fields might fit that bill. And the same thing is true when you're looking at career development. As you're progressing in your career, we talked about it a little while ago, it's never a straight line. You're going to find that perhaps you've come out of college with one degree, but you've taken a left or right turn into some other field that you never saw yourself in. And that's because you're exposed to so much now with the internet and with different processes, and everything's faster and better. And I feel like the $6 million man at this point, as you're trying to catch up with what's going on, your career can take so many different turns. And it's a good thing because you can then find where you're fulfilled. You can look at how you can focus your personal brand and make you stand out in whatever sector that looks like. Wherever you think you're going to make the most impact, which is generally what people want. It's not even so much of how much money they're getting paid or whatever. They want to make an impact, especially I think with the Gen Zers. They're really interested in how they're going to leave their mark and how they want to help others. So knowing what that is really important. So for instance, if you built a personal brand that as being a reliable and organized professional, you might be one of the tech com folks. You might find yourself that you're, excellent in some other fields that are in research, or maybe you're like to be in medical. The sky's the limit. So as long as you don't limit your mind, you have more than plenty of opportunities to figure out what that career development would look like. So how do we get to go into those deep dives? Well, there's a lot of different ways of figuring that out. And I wanted to kind of just briefly go over the intelligence levels that are broken down when you do self-assessments, especially with the next slide. We'll go over the different, some of the different platforms that will help you by asking you personality questions or behavioral questions. But what they're really after when you're looking at those particular types of exams is, what are your intelligence levels? Or, are you a high IQ person? Do you have a super emotional intelligence capacity? Are you positive intelligence? Are you body intelligence? And each one of them has something that brings you to a different area in your career. So if you're a high IQ, maybe you're a data scientist. Maybe, you've gone into being a doctor, or maybe a lawyer, or just someone who has the ability to take on a lot of data and really be able to understand them at a high capacity and find roles that fit that bill and sift through them. Some of them might fit some of the other values that you need as you're figuring out who you are. If you're looking at emotional intelligence, it's managing your emotions to help others. How quickly do you reply when someone's in crisis, or there is a crisis situation, or there is a challenge at work or at home? Do you immediately jump in, or do you simply, take a moment and figure out, well, how would I figure this out? What would be the right method? And depending on what that is, that could look like being somebody, let's say, in human resources. Maybe you're a good people person. You definitely are able to mitigate conflicts between employees, or perhaps you're good at being someone in the public sector where you can work on developing relationships with people to get maybe the homeless initiatives going in your neighborhood. It's really, really exciting stuff. So then you also have a positive intelligence, where this is where the quiet critics make you rethink and reframe what's being said to you. So essentially, let's say you come up with an idea and somebody was like, well, why do you really want to do that? Is that really going to help anybody? What you need to do is take that information and turn it around. And those folks are capable of doing that. So for instance, you're looking at project managers. Let's say you're working on a construction site and there is a challenge perhaps with the engineering report, or some level of construction that's happened on a high rise, and you need to figure out how to mitigate that. You be that person to be able to navigate everything, figure out what that is, turn it into a positive, and get it corrected. It's really, really diverse. There are some people out there that are super at that job, and you might be one of them. That might be something you do after TechCom. You might be one of those to manage projects in your office. And then, of course, the body intelligence is pretty self-explanatory. It's your professional athletes. They are just, I believe, born into this world with the ability to play tennis or basketball or football and excel in those areas. And that's their purpose. That's what they've been put here for. Holistically, individuals strive to develop balance. Balance is the core of everything. And you really want to have a balance of all of these to be able to mitigate everything that comes to you on a daily basis. So how do we figure this out? Well, there are a lot of free assessments. There are a lot of others. I mean, the biggest one everyone knows is a DISC assessment. That one is a little bit on the pricey side. I didn't include it because most people know about it. So that is an option. However, you have these other free options that can kind of give you some basic insights. Maybe they're things that you already know about yourself, but some of them come up with fantastic suggestions of careers that you may not have thought of. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, both Bethany and Julia wrote an article most recently, and you might want to put that in the chat to be able to share your article. I did the actual assessment for myself, and I thought it was really interesting. And it kind of told me what I'm doing now is basically spot on, which was kind of validating. But it also gave me, I think, a half page worth of other career opportunities that I could have explored if this was not something for me. And I thought that was really great, especially if you're coming out of college. It will give you some additional avenues to investigate. And of course, when we get into next week's conversation about LinkedIn, it would give you some extra keywords to be able to use in order to look for those additional job opportunities. And I believe these links will be put in the chat in case anyone wants to check them out afterwards. So part of your self-assessment is to really define your short and long-term goals. Where do you see yourself in a year? Where do you see yourself in 5 and 10? You want to know what kind of lifestyles you want to have. Maybe your background has dictated that you need to, you want to be as basic as possible. You want to live, life to the fullest. So you're a minimalist. And so therefore your position might not require you to have a lot of hours in the office or make a lot of money. And then the flip side, you might be someone who really wants, Gucci wear, and you have to pay for it. So those are the things that you have to judge for yourself, and no one can really tell you about. Then there's also the whole aspect of security. You really want to make sure that if you have a family, that you are able to provide. That is a big thing for men and women, and that has to factor in what you're doing, unless you are not the marrying kind, and that's okay. That might still need a security blanket. So that's something to put into the hopper as you're making your choices. You would also want to look at different industries or professions, job roles, responsibilities. In today's world, there are so many different ways to write a job title so that it is almost too confusing. They decorate them in such ways that it's complicated, and you might know your job is one way, but there might be the same job named 5 different ways. So definitely doing that additional research to kind of figure out what looks and smells the same might yield you some additional opportunities in order to send out your applications and your resumes. Another way to do the research is to talk to professionals in the field. We have some phenomenal folks in STC who are always ready to help. I recently had a client who I believe went to someone on staff to have them assess some of their portfolio pieces, just to make sure that they were approaching them the correct way before they published them. I think that's great mentoring. And this, by the way, STC has a great mentoring program, which I should have mentioned at the beginning. I participated in as well, and I learned a ton. I would not have had that insight without that program. So I thank STC for letting me be a part of that whole world. So if anyone is looking to get into TechCom, that is a very valuable resource. Having somebody else in the field give you some guidance is gold, definitely gold. So if you don't know someone like that, you can definitely go online and you can speak to people on LinkedIn. You could walk into, let's say you want to be a dental assistant. You can walk into a dentist office and say, I'd like to shadow you, or I'd like to know more about what you do. Could you spend a few moments, do those informational interviews, understand what they do before you do a deep dive into investing yourself and your education and your time into those particular fields. And of course, you want to make sure that there's abilities for you to grow, because if you can't grow, you're going to be unsatisfied at some point. So you definitely want to figure out what that is, what growth means to you, because it means something for everybody differently, and kind of incorporate that in your search. Once you have all of that assessed, it is really clear at that point what kind of education you need. TechCom for us was having certifications through STC, getting an education at a local university. All of that helps. All of it shows dedication, shows that consistency of wanting to learn the craft. The same thing goes for any other industry. Definitely want to know that you're getting the exact information. When I came into doing resume writing, and it was not immediately apparent to me, I found out that there is an entire world of that. And sort of my practice when I write for people is a hybrid between the TechCom world and actually the resume writing. So I look at my documents to make sure that they're paginated correctly. I'm looking to make sure that there's spell and grammar checks. I'm making sure there's enough white space. And we'll go into that in a few slides. But I seem to have carried over the best parts of TechCom as I'm writing. So there is a way to sometimes merge those different attributes from different industries to figure out what your new normal would be. Then there's personal circumstances, of course, depending on your location, family members you might have to care for, and then balancing your career goals with your personal life is really important. You never want to be stressed, especially having gone through the pandemic. There was a big shift, and everyone is aware of it. There's not new news, but everyone figured out that work-life balance was really important, and they made those changes accordingly. And there isn't anything wrong with that. It just, these types of terrible situations, if you want to call them that, kind of gave you different perspectives that you wouldn't have thought of. So it kind of forced you to think outside the box, and it's okay to do that. People who are already in a career might be thinking of career transitions, and everything we just talked about in the previous slides would apply to someone who's looking to do a transition. You could be looking at going from being a project manager, maybe you want to go into teaching, or vice versa. There might be different things that you can apply your skill sets. The only thing that you can do to get started is to research. If you don't look up different avenues and talk to people, you're never going to know. It's not going to jump off a page for you. So it's really important that you kind of figure out what you want to do. I had a friend who had worked for the county down here in Palm Beach County, and she was a science major. And basically said, I want to work in the environment. I want to be outside. I don't want to be holed up into an office. And one day, a teaching position came and fell in her lap, working with a high school local to her. And she was like, well, I'll try it for a year. Let's see what happens. And ended up absolutely falling in love with it. She got her teaching certificate and ended up doing that as a regular gig. And she loves it. She still gets to do science. She still gets to do everything she loves on that field, but now she's actually sharing it with others. And I think that she found a plateau of where she's able to give back and receive at the same time, which is what everybody wants. You also want to make sure that whatever you're choosing or going into, you want to assess what your financial situations and, again, local preferences and personal life balances. You have to. No matter what you're doing, you have to make sure that whether you're coming in it to a clean or you're doing the transition, it has to make sense. Otherwise, it's not going to work. HR trends. So 75% of resumes don't qualify because of lack of formatting, content, or lack of keywords. Some of this is the verbiage we use in TechCom. This is just common sense, to be honest with you. This goes before computers. This was very big. If you can't spell or you cannot put a sentence together, it's going to show badly, whether it's on paper or not. You're not going to be able to land the job that you need to. And I will tell you that for all of the folks that I have helped over the last couple of years, it really is astounding that our schools are patching people through without the proper ability to do proper sentence formats or be able to say, deliver a complete thought. It really is unbelievable. And I feel sad for the children that are coming out of school because it really is going to be a challenge for them as they become adults. But make sure all of that is fixed and set on your documents before you send them out, because it ends up becoming counterproductive. The job opportunities that are out there, and I think this is probably a low number. They're saying that it's 250 applicants per job opening. I have seen them higher. We'll go over the whole numbering that comes out of LinkedIn when you apply for a job on that platform. Some of that's a little off, and we'll go over that. But it's a high average. The hiring managers used to take 6 seconds to look at a resume. Now it's 7.4 seconds. I'm not sure who they're timing, but that's what the average has been. And essentially, the applications and resumes, about 80% of them don't make it past the first screening. Less than 3% of them of sent resumes result in a job interview, which is really low. And 25% of resumes make it past the ATS, which we will talk about in a future slide, before they even get to a human recruiter. So the types of things that they're doing with the ATS, and again, we'll talk about that in a moment, is lengths of resume. There are people who will, and it depends whether you're doing a CV or a resume, but length is really important. It does factor in the way that we are having the HR people are reviewing their resumes. It's just the way that the programming is set up. So it is something that has to be consciously looked at when you're preparing your own document. 77% of resumes don't fit the recommended range. They just don't have the skill sets that are set in the job opportunity, but they send them in anyway. And sometimes I believe it's people who are on unemployment. I know that in the past, I've been on unemployment, and that was something you did to make sure that you got that check every week until you could find your job. So it still goes on. It's not a new trend. It's an ongoing trend. And so that is part of that number. Research also finds that 68% of candidates who use professional resume services, they get jobs within 90 days. Now that 90-day number is a combination. It's not solely about the writer. It's also about what's going on in the market. There are a lot of hiring managers that are taking a full on 45 days just to send out an email saying, by the way, we were interested in you. Let's set up an interview. At that point, you might have sent out 50 more applications and you have no idea who's looking at your information. So that number has to be factored into not just the writer, but what's going on in the marketplace. All right, let's get into the deep dive of the documents. And hopefully I'm not going too quickly, but I think that this section is going to really give us a little more of a deeper dive into the document structure, language, and how we approach them. Essentially, for people who may or may not know, resumes, French for summarize, and you also have CVs, which are only used by a certain sector of the workforce. The resumes are very selective. You can do them in different ways. It is very subjective, in my opinion, on how they're written. It depends on who you're writing for, depends on the type of job you're writing about, depends on the skill sets of the person that has come to you. There's a lot of factors. The document type is really dependent on what role you're going for. So if you're a doctor, a nurse, a teacher, a lawyer, you'd probably veer towards wanting a CV. That will give you additional pages. Sometimes it's between 3 and 8 pages, where a resume is 1 to 2 pages. The CV is a little longer. You might have published works. You might have some extensive volunteer experience that tie into what you do for a profession. There's a lot of things that the CV will allow you to expand upon, but whoever you're sending it to is expecting that CV. If you do not need a CV, you do not need a 5-page resume. It is unnecessary to go on. People don't want to read novels these days. They're in for quick information. They want to get out. So your best bet is to really tone it down when you're in the resume area. All right, so trivia. Here we have 2 different kinds of resumes. No, you can't see what the deep dive on the language is, but maybe if you guys would put in chat, would you think that the one on the left is the most appropriate one, or the one on the right would be the best practice to use these days? Okay, we're getting a couple saying right. All right. Okay, the basic consensus is it is the right side. So why don't we use the one on the left? Well, the one on the left lends itself to a lot of different biases. It's pretty. I know everyone knows they could do it in Canva. Yes, that's right. It has a photo. And I'm going to address the photo because that conversation is on LinkedIn a lot. Well, why would you not put it on your resume, but you have it on LinkedIn? Why does that make sense? Well, the resume is your first line of defense. Unless a recruiter is looking for you online, they're typically looking at your resume first. So you want the advantage of not having something where everybody's personal bias would definitely factor into why they would pass you on to have have an interview set up. It doesn't make sense for you to be at a deficit. So your best practice is to keep it as simple as possible, to keep it without a photo. And I will say, I have some European clients. European custom is that they do put their pictures on. They do put a lot more information on those resumes that I would never have thought to do it, but it is customary there. So cultural practices definitely have to come into play. But here in the States, the right side is a more accepted practice. Now, there was some discussion. I think there were some questions that had come in through registration about, portfolios and things like that, which we'll get into organically through the conversation here. But I wanted to kind of zoom in at the top, because the top half of the resume is the most important real estate on any resume. It is the first part that the the hiring managers scan to find out whether or not you're even a good fit. So some of the elements they're looking for is to find out whether or not your titling is right, whether or not you have a portfolio, if you have a LinkedIn page, if you have an email address, where do you live? And living where you live is kind of important. I know it's a hot topic. I've been in a number of online discussions about this. Well, why can't they just take somebody from anywhere in the United States? Why does it have to be from these states and be remote? The idea is that companies cannot afford to pay for income taxes in all 50 states. It is very expensive. So they limit themselves to the companies, or into the states that they have filed in. And it really is rather pricey. And I think for the average person who doesn't see that side of the business, they really have no idea. That's right, Nicole. So health insurance is another part of it. Sometimes the plans that we're on don't cross state lines. And so it gets more pricey to get help from other sides. Now, it's not to say that you would not have exceptions to the rule. They're out there, especially if it's a hard position to fill. So that's why it's important. I have a lot of clients who are like, I don't want to put my name, my state and my city there. And I said, well, you're going to end up wasting your time on interviewing for something you may not be qualified for. You might find that this company is not capable of hiring you after you go through 3 rounds of interviews. That would be a waste of your time and theirs. Put it up front, be honest, give them everything that they need to know up front. That way they can make an informed decision. And that way it's a much more advantageous and effective interview process. But when we get into portfolios later, you'll notice I have this hyperlink up here. This is one of the ways that you can present that you have a portfolio. It really becomes a easy link, and you could have an entire section about portfolios depending on the types of samples that you want to provide based on the type of work you're going to do. So if you're in tech comm, and we'll get into showcasing some of those pieces later, you'll have a certain set of documentation that you've worked on that might not be proprietary, things that you've done before, that you can put on a website or what have you, and then link them here at the top of the page, or you can name them in their own section. Depends on how much real estate you have to work with on a document. But that top half is the most important. Hyperlinks are very easy and accessible. And I know I see it here, and probably some people are cringing. The underline is something that we kind of veer away for accessibility purposes. My bad for not having taken it out, but it is something where we take that out, make it accessible. It also lends itself, if you're in the tech comm field, that you're showing and you're cognizant of those expectations. So when we get to writing the actual body of the resume, there are different approaches about how you collect the data and display it. Some of these may be familiar to you. They're called either STAR, which is situation, action, result, or STAR, where you have situation, task, action, result. Either way, whichever one you use, the result is the same. It's basically answering the questions. Describe a, tell us about a time, have you ever, do you have an example of? And these might also seem familiar as interview questions. So when we get into the interview sector, that's the part where if you do the deep dive here, you're able to answer all the questions at the end, because you've already invested the time to uncover all of the juicy golden nuggets of your career on the document. Well, how do we do that? It's professional storytelling. We talk about projects we work on. We talk about challenges we have, and everyone has them, whether it's challenges with people, projects, process change, whatever it is, there is a story behind everything you do. You're given projects that might be daunting, that maybe you had to work on with a team, so they might not be holistically all yours, but it definitely shows that you're able to work with people and what have you. And in a minute, I'll show you an example of what the storytelling looks like. But as we break down each part, you're looking at the situation. So the situation is going to be giving me what happened. What was it that you were served up, that you had to take care of, where you were assigned, that needed your assistance. It could have been something brand new, could have been something that needed to be fixed. Whatever the case may be, you've done it. I don't care if you worked in mortgages. I don't care if you were in college. In college, you had the same project. You had a project, you had multiple projects just to be able to graduate. And those required certain steps for you to be able to get to the completion stage. That is key to recognizing what those features are in order to write these SAR pieces. So you want to provide context for your example. You want to describe the situation, when it took place, what was involved. This is an opportunity for you to set the stage, set the scene about how you got to this place. Was it assigned to you? Are you what we call a subject matter expert or a SME, that people come to you for those specific things? Those stories are powerful, and a lot of them come with metrics, which we'll talk about in a minute. But you want to be as specific as possible, but get into the granular levels of it, because it doesn't just talk about what you did. It talks about everything that went into getting it done. So when you get into the action portion of it, you're going to give more details about how you did it. So for instance, for me personally, I'll give you a quick anecdote. My company is going through a transition, and I essentially was told I needed to find a new provider for our travel and expense policies and our platforms and how we were using our corporate cards. We were divorcing ourselves from a parent company, and we needed all brand new processes. So we were charged with going out and interviewing companies that we never did business with before to be able to find a good fit for our travelers. And after some extensive interviews and deep dives into processes, the short end of it is that I ended up finding a platform that was capable of doing travel, expense reporting, and I don't know if anybody's familiar, but I believe Julie remembers I did an article on ESG. But there are so many different layers that covered us for our efforts in the office. And then I had to roll that out once we implemented it. We got the contract done. You can hear about all the things just by how I'm explaining the different pieces of that project. There was the contract negotiations, there's training, there was documentation that had to be built. There was so much effort put in to get this entire process packaged and implemented and then served up to the employees, that project gave so many layers of dimension of things that I could do if given another project or if taking on a new role. You were able to demonstrate how you're doing so many different things: process change, communication, negotiation, all of it. All of it counts. And we'll get into what those elements are in just a minute. But going into the weeds of it is what's going to help you build this SAR. Whoops, a little small there. Sorry about that. So once we do those first two portions, then we have to get into the results. Well, how did that happen? What exactly was the bottom line for getting this project done? Well, I managed to get 85 employees to be trained, get them cards issued, and get them working on the platform in a manner that was acceptable by our compliance team and our finance team. That's huge. Those are some pretty basic processes in the office. They're big parts of the office that are reliant because we deal with trades and things like that. It was essential that they needed to get that working and working efficiently for everyone. So when you come to the outcome, the 85 employees, that's a metric. How long did it take me? It took me 3 months to get it done. There's your metric. What was your measured result? Is that we put in a new process that was 100% received and implemented. So there's a lot of numbers that you might not think are numbers, or we might not think are metrics, but actually work. Well, why do we need all of this? Thinking about it, if you see an ad for your favorite product, let's use iPhone. I'm sure a lot of people use an iPhone. When they give you these ads on TV, they're showing you the big and fabulous parts of the ads. They're telling you, 3 times faster on the camera. Well, your number or your eye is really drawn to the numbers. They're drawn to the bigger efforts that are going on with the product they're putting out. You're putting out a product too. You're putting out, you yourself are putting in time vested into these projects that are yielding these metrics. And when you write for the different experiences or achievements that you have, that's stuff that you want to put in to be able to explain to people how effective your work was. So this is I'm not going to read through all of this. It kind of gives you the situation, how somebody would explain what they had done for their project, the type of action that they had to go through in order to work on the project, and then what their results were. And you can see as you get to the bottom in the results area, you can see that they put in that their overall productivity increased by 20%. So essentially, when you take all three of these parts and you put them together into a short statement, the statement will look like this. Much better to read than reading the novel of that much text and what happened on a granular level. It kind of gives you an understanding of achieve a 20% departmental productivity increase by implementing weekly team meetings, fostering communication, et cetera, et cetera. There's also a perspective that we talked about at the beginning of this presentation that you can take this and look at it from another angle. What would be your purpose? What would be better for you depending on what job you're going for? Is it to show that you're capable of making things more efficient? Or would they want to see someone who is capable of running a team? That could be another way of presenting yourself as being that person. You could be a project manager, or you could be just a manager of a department in its entirety. You could, there's the options are endless, but this is the different ways that you can come into a particular STAR story and break it down to make it work for you. It's still going to give you the same, the same output, but giving you different perspectives. Now, a lot of what you do when you're telling these stories is to kind of put in your transferable skills. Now, you might have heard this term, you may know this term. For those in the back that don't know, transferable skills are really important in terms of putting in what I call the social level of your work. It's basically something everyone has and has in multiple ways. It's communication, it's research, it is a host of others, which we'll go through in just a minute. But when you use the terms into the body of what you're explaining as part of your achievements, it gives a better or more well-rounded picture about how you are in different scenarios. What do you bring to the table that helps you get to those particular metrics of 20% or leading teams or what have you? So it's not necessary based on the job, but it's based on you personally, and they can be taken from any job and put into another job. So for instance, if I have somebody who's working in Walmart and they're working the customer service desk, I can pluck them out of there and I can put them into a call center, and they can be doing the same customer service just on the phone. They're using their communication skills, they're using their relationship building skills in order to do the same type of customer service work, but under a different umbrella, under a whole different perspective. So know that everyone has it, and you have to incorporate it in order to make all the other language work and all of your achievements gel. So here's some common transferable skills: your communication, your teamwork, your problem solving. You've all seen these words. These are not words you front load into your branding statement. You don't put them in. These are things that you organically place throughout your document because it's expected that you can communicate. It's expected that you can work with a team. It's expected that you have time management skills. If you have to tell somebody that you're great at your time management, that is the worst use of the real estate on the document. You need to show them what you're going to be able to do to make their business better. And these are things that are already given. These are all things that are accepted and expected. So you want to kind of put them in elsewhere, put them in on your cover letter. These are things that you can explain when you're in an interview. They can be part of your traits, which we'll talk about in the third pillar of the workshop. But these are all common. I see these all the time. I actually had somebody send me a resume. They're like, why can't you put down that I'm a problem solver and I'm this and I'm that? And I'm like, because you are in finance and you do so many other things that it's expected that you can do detail-oriented work. You're in finance, you're dealing with numbers. So it's important that you use the real estate to your advantage. Now, we're going to talk about ChatGPT because it kind of pairs into how you're writing and where you're getting your source information. And basically, I'm not at all telling people not to use ChatGPT or Bard or any of the other AI. I think the innovation is awesome. I think it really serves its purpose. I have fun using it. Sometimes it gets me out of a jam. I'm trying to think of a term and I can't figure it out. I'll throw my idea in there and it'll give me an option. Sometimes it's a title for a blog post that I'm doing. I'm looking for something a little more clever that I can't simply do. So you can use it, but don't overdo it. You basically want to make sure that you use it to articulate your thoughts better. Use it to suss out whatever, maybe what a company is looking for. You can put in a job description and figure out what kind of individual they're looking for. And you can use it for research. You can find out what would it take for you to become a tech comm industry leader? What would it take for you to morph into a new career? AI will help you with that. They will give you, to a degree, it will give you some information or tell you, or at least lead you to where you can look for more information. It is not great to write your resume with it. It should never be used to take the place of you. What you lose in using AI when you're writing your resume is you. You want your voice, you want your personality to come out. You want to know that there's a real human working on that document, whether you have a professional do it or if you do it yourself, doesn't matter. You want to make sure it's your words, because at the end of the day, if you're not that kind of person who has a very high level language and you've now presented a resume that has Harvard language on it, and then you come to a meeting and you don't speak that way, you're kind of misrepresenting yourself. So it's better for you to use it sparingly and be able to adapt what you might have a shortcoming on. The rest should be all about you. Now, there were some questions, I believe, is submitted about the different types of resumes that are out there and what ones would you use in which search situations. And there are a couple of myths in here that I want to go over really quickly. The most common one that people use is chronological. I use it. I use functional based as well. My preferred method is the combination. The combination gives you everything. It gives you the whole kit and caboodle. It gives you enough at the top of your real estate document of your resume, the real estate that's up there, to be scanned very easily by a hiring manager. And it allows you to get all of the details that are pertinent for the job out there. There are other ones you can use which are targeted. I have used, depending on what kind of work, let's say you're going for a police officer or you're going to be a nurse, those would have very specific dialogue or language used, and you would want to target that. You don't want to tell someone that you've been working in Target when you're trying to get a job at a hospital. It doesn't jive. So you want to make sure that that's targeted. Then you have federal resumes, which I don't do. Those are really labor intensive and they follow a very, very specific format. There are a few people out there who do this for a living, and God bless them. It's a lot of work. It's very tedious. This is actually a very good sector to go into because there's not a lot of people. So if you're looking for a job and you're great at writing, this might be something to look into. Do some research on it, because there's a lot of money to be made there and there's a lot of work out there. There are a lot of people who are going after government type jobs and they can't apply because they don't have that federal resume. You also have creative, that is good for people who are in design or fashion, and then infographic. I do not subscribe to an infographic unless somebody's asking me for it. Infographic ends up being a problem with ATS, which we'll go into in a minute, but it's loaded with visual graphs, charts, and images, which are not ATS friendly. And we'll go into it in a minute, but it does serve a purpose in certain situations, and I would only recommend doing it if it's asked of you. So which one do you use? And the type really depends on what you're doing, where you're going, what kind of experience do you have? It is the last thing that you choose. You need to uncover from all the things that we talked about at the beginning of this particular program, is you have to figure out who you are and where you're going. What kind of information are you going to share with your reader? That then, once it's assembled, you can figure out how is it going to lay out, what kind of a resume you're going to need. That target audience is very key to how you're displaying your information, what kind of format you're going to use. So it should not be at the high level of how you choose to send out your resume or how you approach your resume. Your resume should be content first and then worry about your design later. Because at the end of the day, if your design is fabulous and your wording's terrible, they're not going to hire you. It's not going to happen. You'll always know more once you have done the deep dive on yourself and see how it applies to your future. Because if you don't do that dive, you're actually just walking blind, and that's not going to be a good use of your time. And a lot of it too, once you find which one to use, then loads itself into what we're all very familiar with, is the UX UI environment. And essentially you want to make sure that you're using it to your advantage. We talked a little earlier about having, white spaces and clean and consistent layouts. And a lot of people like to use templates. Templates are not your friend. They look nice. They're on Canva. You can buy them. A lot of resume writers use them. I don't subscribe to them because it does a disservice to my clients. I don't feel that they are getting past the ATS systems, and it's much simpler to go with a clean, simple format. It's better to have, nice, clear hierarchies and make sure that I prioritize all the content and relevance, customizing it to whatever the job target is. That's the best use, and that's the best UX UI kind of experience you have. You want to limit your length to be 1 or 2 pages. Make sure it's mobile friendly so that you're not extending your margins so wide, but not so much that it becomes this blur if somebody's looking at it on their phone or some sort of tablet. You have to kind of be, as much as we're very conscious of it in TechCom, have to be conscious of it on your resume as well, which is kind of why that whole discussion about me doing the hybrid writing comes into play. I kind of get the fun part of it with the TechCom, but also the creative juices for the writing. Use readable fonts. Not every font is beautiful. It might look good on screen, but it may not look good on paper. You want to make sure ultimately it looks good in both places. So you can do Arial, Calibri, you can Helvetica. There are maybe 1 or 2 others you could try, but kind of limit yourself. Open Sans is another one. Those are just simple, easy to read. You don't want to hurt somebody's eyes while they're reading your documents. And bullet points. I can't tell you how many people give me a resume to rewrite, and it's in 1 giant paragraph. Nobody wants to read that. I think they get bored after line 2. It's really uninteresting to look at it that way. So if you break up your text, it makes it a little more visually interesting. You want to make sure that your bullets are all your achievements. And that's the SARS stories we talked about a few minutes ago. If you put those into bullets, they will be easily scanned, and the reader can get a full sense of what you're capable of doing and what you have been doing. You want to make sure your color palettes are very, I hate to say plain, but make them very neutral. You don't want hot pink and lime, and I have seen them. It's been a little bright. There is visual dynamics to the hierarchies, using, the sizes of your headings being one size versus what your text, not too dramatic. But basically, if you do these different visual dynamics on your document, it will force, or I wouldn't say force, but maybe entice the reader to go to the end of the document, scan all the way through instead of just the first top half. And your white space is super important. Packing your resume because you feel everything is relevant is not the best use of the document. It really needs to have white space because you want to give the eye a break. And that way they'll continue to read and ensure that everything gives, it's enough for each effort. You want to make sure everything is captured with the reader's eye. No photos, no graphs or charts. It is unnecessary to have any of that unless it's specifically asked for. I also recommend that once you do develop it in Word or Google Docs, whatever your preferred method is, or if you're using Pages for Mac, you change it into a PDF format. You want to make sure that you are preserving it, and you want to make sure you're protecting your information. When we get into the LinkedIn portion, I will explain that there's a place to put that document, but you want to make sure that you're not putting it in Word where somebody can pick it out and basically take your data and change it or copy it for themselves. I had a customer early on who had loaned his resume to a friend who did the same thing, and the friend forgot to change the phone number. So the first guy was getting the phone calls from the second guy, whoever he was applying. And he's like, I'm not looking for work. And he's like, but your phone number is on here. And they come to pass that he basically plagiarized his resume and forgot to change the phone number. And so it had the other guy's name and the first guy's phone number. It was a bit of a hot mess. He had a little bit of trouble with that one. Hyperlinks are good to use, and I encourage them. Make sure your document is accessible. You want to make sure that if you're adding data, I sometimes like to use quotes from hiring managers or other professionals that you've worked with who can support their ability, not their ability, but their experience working with you in a similar setting, that they're either on LinkedIn, you can capture that. And I put that on the resumes and I blocks them in so that basically they're set aside. It gives a little bit of a visual dynamic, depending on what the effort is. They don't do it for everybody because it's not enough real estate for some folks. And remember, however you lay it out, that document is a brand. It's your professional brand. It represents you. So however you want people to see you, that's how I believe you should approach your documentation. Customization. There's a lot of talk about tailoring it for every single job. The only things that I recommend tailoring are two things. Number one, if you noticed at the beginning, I had put a headline or a title, job title. That is something I put there for the initial writing of the resume. But at the end of the day, when you're submitting, you want to change that to match whatever the job title is for the job you're pursuing, because that will tell the hiring manager who you want to be, what job you're going after. So that is one thing to tailor. And the other thing is your branding statement. So you have what most people consider a summary statement. The branding statement is about you and where you're going. So it's explaining what your hot topics are and then explaining what you want to do, what's your objective. And essentially, you might be seeking out two different channels of work. You don't want to use the same channel for both jobs. They might not have anything to do with one another. So you can just easily opt out and have a second paragraph to supplement. But the rest of the body of what you're doing is exactly the same. Everything else is going to be, you've worked at the same places, you've done the same projects, you're explaining the same transferable skills. So there's no reason to change the body. It's really just the top half of the document. So that way it's a little more customized or targeted to where you're going. Okay, did we get into, oh, we're in cover letters now. So cover letters. Cover letters is another piece that is a bit of a contested item. There are people who do not believe in cover letters. They don't believe that they serve a purpose any longer, that we should discard them, do away with them. There's been some really colorful language about it. I am old school. I believe that a cover letter shows your personality. It shows whatever you cannot explain on your 2-page resume. That information is very specific to you and you're trying to communicate. So you're wanting to explain and showcase how you write. You want to explain who you are, what you're after. It's also going to explain how much research you have done on a company. I coach all of my clients to go into the companies that they're going to apply to and read about them. Why? Because it's going to tell you whether or not A, you're a good fit for the firm, B, if the firm is a good fit for you, and C, it's also going to show you how they treat their people, what their core values are, and what their mission statements are. And so you basically want to see if their whole premise for being in business aligns with yours. So you might find that there's a company you love and you really want to go work for them, but you might find out that they don't do any training or they don't promote their employees. There's no upward mobility. I don't think there's a lot of people that, unless you're absolutely desperate for work, want to be that kind of environment. You want to be valued, you want to move up. That might not be the job for you, but you would not know that unless you did the research. So what you want to do is you want to do the research. You want to make sure that you at least put in a paragraph in your cover letter that identifies the fact that you have looked them up, however you look them up. And you can say, I love how you are doing volunteer work every year. I love how you have 3 people that you've promoted from X to Y and given them opportunities to work in the public sector, whatever it looks like. Each company is going to showcase something different. Everyone is going to bring some element that is unique to them. A perfect example about how effective a cover letter is, my nephew is in engineering, and he basically wanted to get past the round 2. And he said, can you help me figure out how to, get their attention? It seems like they like me, but I want to get a little further. Okay. I said, did you do any research? And he was like, well, not really. I said, well, go in and take a look at them. And he came out finding out that they make their volunteering company-wide and like a annual event. It's almost like having a Christmas party or a holiday party. And they basically pick a particular organization to support, and everybody goes all out. Every single person is involved. And they find that as people are doing more of the volunteer work, they seem to be much more productive as a team. They may seem to be more productive in their work. And so he went on to write about that, how he thought that was a fabulous idea. And they pulled it right out. They pulled that section right out of it and talked about it in the second interview. They called him for a second interview. They said, we like the fact that you sent us something a little more personal, and let's talk about this. Why did you like that so much? And they basically used it as a platform or a springboard to be able to have additional dialogue with him. It gave him a platform to show them how he can communicate, show them how he's interested in being part of a team. So there is some validity and some truths to having a cover letter and doing it in the proper way. You certainly don't want to go, hi, here's my cover letter, and I hope you call me. Nobody's going to hire you that way. No, there's no personality in it. You really need to put your best foot forward. Now, could you do an overall shell and then customize parts of it? Absolutely. You can have one that covers most and then you fill in the blanks, but then you go in and do the research and add yourself a paragraph, whatever that might look like. That will definitely spring you forward in most circles. I'm not saying every hiring manager reads it. I'm sure there are some that will disqualify you for having a cover letter, which is really sort of short-sighted, but it does happen. And if that's the case, you are not meant to be there. It's kind of my philosophy.
Hey, Joanna, a quick
Yes, ma'am.
time check. We are at 8:18.
Okay.
So I know you have a lot of great things to cover, and I want to make sure you get time to do so. So we were tending to wrap at 8:30. If people are okay, we might go a little bit over to allow time for some of the questions, but I want to
Okay.
make sure you still get time to cover the portfolio items as well.
Thank you
Loving
for
the
that, Diana.
presentation. Didn't mean to interrupt. but-
Nope. I appreciate that. Thank you. You get lost in the subject matter a little bit. All right. So a lot of it's call to action, putting in all the relevant information. There's a lot that you can do to put in your professional tone, be very concise with your cover letters. You want to make sure that you don't have any unnecessary details, and make sure always proof your documents. Applicant tracking, it's pretty self-explanatory. How does it work? Basically, hiring managers will use it, some don't. If you're applying on LinkedIn, it's almost always used because the managers are trying to mitigate the volume that they're getting. And basically, they have set parameters in the background to be able to single out the people who are most qualified based on the criteria they built into the platform. What things can't this do? Well, if you have a document that has columns, and some of these newfangled Canva templates have columns, it can't parse out the information. If you use text boxes, it can't read the information. If you put your details in the header, it will absolutely leave your contact information blank. It won't pick it up. There are just reasons why it still needs some work, but it is being used very widely, so it's good to be conscious of it. The reasons why people are like auto rejected is probably because they didn't look at the job op to see if they were qualified. They did not include information that matched what the hiring manager was looking for. There's just no way to tell too what kind of weight they put on certain terms or content that they were looking for in a particular candidate. So your best bet is to do a smattering of looking at different jobs and see maybe common denominators. What are they looking for overall in that particular field that you could talk about? And hopefully that will give you enough ammunition to get past the ATS. I heard that there was a percentage that you have to be in the top 25% of the matching terms in order to be moved on. I do know that there are hiring managers that will still go through the submissions, and they will, just make sure that someone didn't get kicked out erroneously. So that does still happen, but just know that the best foot forward in these ATS environments are really key. Just making sure that you get it done, because you're never going to know all the time when they're using it. You want to make sure that you're not using buzzwords, using headers, using simple headers. Don't use your text boxes for your headers. It's not necessary. It's just going to make things more complicated. It will not be able to read your document properly. So no text boxes, no columns, no graphs, no pictures. Now, for those of us who know anything about heat mapping, this should be a little exciting. I'm hoping that I'm not completely boring tonight, but this was a study that was done by Ladders in 2018, and it would probably still hold true, but it kind of shows you overall in a document what is heavily looked at. And you can see, if you know stuff about heat mapping, where the eye goes is what they're looking at. So they're looking at titles, they're looking at your core competencies, they're looking at your information at the top of the page. They're not looking here in the middle in the meat, if you notice. They're just not focusing as much. So the first stage of the testing on this was to see speed, what were they attracted to first, and then what they spent the most time on. And again, it went from the looking at these documents went from like 6 seconds to 7.5 seconds. So they sped it up, they gave a little more credence to this, but you can get an idea of where the more important portions and where you should spend the most amount of your time being strategic about your information. All right, portfolio building. Everybody's interested in this part. So portfolio building is really interesting because you can do it in almost any sector or any job that is requiring you to do a specific task. So in TechCom specifically, there, of course, everyone knows you're doing all kinds of documentation, and they're wanting to always see in certain circles how you do your work. Do you give it up front? I would not give it up front. I would direct them to a site that you build or you put together, or maybe some document that you can snapshot what you've done. However that looks like for you, this is how you would assemble all of your best work. Where do you get your content? So you can go to bad websites and create it. Look for maybe someone needs a frequently asked question page. You could put one together. You can look at past school projects if you're newly out of school. I had a bunch of them, which we'll see in a minute. You can do volunteer work. You can go to maybe new companies in your area and say, look, I'm looking to get some experience under my belt. I want to volunteer my time, and I just want to be able to be recognized for the work I'm putting together because I'm trying to build a portfolio. Can I work with you? If you're currently working, you might be able to work on current employer initiatives. When I graduated, I ended up as a final project working on an IT manual, and then subsequently went in to working on our travel policy. So there were different initiatives that I could get at the office, and I'm sure everyone could do the same. You have these options available to everybody. How do you showcase it? Well, you want to create something maybe on WordPress, Wix, GoDaddy Website Builder. They all have free versions you can do. You can purchase a domain if you want to with your name. Some of the professional platforms, which I believe Julia will put in the chat, as Behance, Dribbble, of course, LinkedIn. LinkedIn's better for your writing pieces. So if you are creating blogs or newsletters, if you follow me on LinkedIn, you'll see that I post several times a week. I schedule those out. I don't sit the night before and write them. I do them a couple of weeks in advance, and I schedule them out so I don't have to think about it. So I have a day of downtime. I'll think about or write about a bunch of different topics. I'll schedule them out, and they run themselves. And however they get received, they're received. The one that got the most amount of metrics was my one on the top 10 interview tips. And I couldn't believe it. It had impressions of over 15,000, which was like ridiculous. I couldn't believe it. I had to look at it twice thinking I was blind or something. But you never know what's going to hit, and you want to just go with things that people are going to resonate with. So you can put things on your own blog. You can use Blogger. You can use pieces that you did on freelance sites. All of this, unless it's proprietary and it's told that it's proprietary, you should be able to at least discuss maybe a front page or something. But you can go on and do documents on products that you have around your home. It's really super simple to do. It's what they teach us to do when we were going through our program at UCF. So some examples of mine where I did a student guide for the library. So I did this whole new students coming in, how to use the library system. My document, I don't remember, it was like 10 or 15 pages. I got permission from the library, and they let me use all the imagery that they had on the website, and I created a document. We also had to do a user guide. So I picked Google, figured it was something simple, made that. Now you're not going to see the depth of this, but I just kind of want to give some of the examples of things you can do. I did a product manual. These are all projects I did in school. I did a quick start guide, a tutorial, I did a fundamentals of heat mapping. It was just a flyer about it, and it had actually to do with the pandemic. So I took some information off the CDC website and created this document. I did one, this was my first project, was to create a flyer for something environmental. So we did that for monarch butterflies. This won me an award actually from UCF for innovation on the visual dynamics. So I was pretty excited about that because I didn't think I'd win anything, but I did. So that was kind of cool. But it was fun to put some of this in, and the research that goes into it. Anybody can do this. You don't need to go through a program to put this together. Some of this, and John Clement is not on tonight, but John Clement is part of STC, and he was a classmate, and Nicole Lundquist is also a fellow. Oh, John's here. Oh, I didn't see him come in. Hi, John. So he lurks. Basically, John and I worked on the League of Legends. We did a whole usability testing, which was so much fun. We had a group of 4. And then I also did one with the Starfleet Command Academy with Nicole, and that was a much more monumental project. That was almost an entire semester worth of work, and it was crazy. Hey, John. So basically, you have the ability to put these pieces together. Do it with a friend. If you have somebody who's in the same sector as you. Now, you might be just a writer. You could do blog pieces. You can put them all over the place. If you might be a person who does photography, you could do that too. If you're in a particular industry, let's say you're in Medicare, in the medical field, maybe you do research and you write your own papers, and that's how you become more of a credible source when somebody's looking at your work. And that is the end of session 1. I hope I didn't speed through too much of this, and I hope it didn't bore too many folks. But I wanted to field some questions. So ladies, if you want to share with me what you have, I'd be happy to answer.
Yeah, thank you, Joanna. I really appreciate it. And sorry, I know we put you under the gun. You had a lot of material to cover. So thank you. You got so many things addressed. So I don't know, Julia, if you wanted to pull from some of the questions we have. Julia's been capturing everything.
You want me to go for the ones submitted in chat or the ones we got ahead of time?
Let's do maybe the ones that were submitted ahead of time first. I think there's only a couple outstanding. I believe Joanna answered almost all of the others as she went.
Okay, we have one. Any advice for a high school science teacher wanting to change careers and become a tech writer?
Good question. Well, if whatever industry you're in, and some of the folks on the panel can help too with this. I mean, you have to figure out what is it that you're interested in specifically. What kind of teacher was it? I'm sorry.
High school science teacher.
Science. Okay. So there are a number of companies, I believe even in South Florida, I'm sure they're in the other states as well, who do have the positions available for TechCom. I think what you need to kind of do is look at the job ops in those areas and look and see what the requirements are. I would then build a portfolio for myself if I were this individual, and basically again build my research and my writing and showcase what those employers would be looking for. You could also do what I call informational interviews. You could go in and find someone on LinkedIn that is associated with a particular company that you're interested in working for, and hit them up on a private message and basically say, hey, I'm interested. Can you tell me how you got there? Can you give me more information about what you love best about your work? Because it also will tell you whether or not you're barking up the right tree. You want to make sure if you're going to invest all this time that you've had enough research, talking to people as much as you are reading about it, to find out if it's the right channel for you. So I hope I answered that question.
Yeah, I definitely think so.
Yeah. And another question that was submitted ahead is, how old can your portfolio pieces be?
All right, great question. I will say I cheated a little. I did converse with some folks here. I agreed with them too. I think that you want to be relevant. You want to make sure that your information is relevant with the times, because we are moving at such a fast pace with everything that we do. What might have been good 20 years ago might have a new format now, might be something better now. So the consensus is within within 3 to 5 years, reassess what you have as sample pieces and kind of look through the internet and see what other people are doing. It's okay to check out what other folks are doing. Sometimes they have a better way of doing it. Sometimes it's a little more efficient. Sometimes the design is a little more inducive to what, the way the world is moving. So if you keep looking at it every few years, I think that should be sufficient. There are some pieces that are timeless. They will not change. They will have a very standard format for all of eternity. But I think for the most part, especially when you're looking at, let's say, quick start guides and all of that, you want to make sure that you stay as relevant as possible to what the industry standards are.
Thanks, Joanna. Just a quick note, since we're at 8:32, I think we'll go a few more minutes so Joanna can try to answer some of the other questions from the chat. So we'll go kind of rapid fire, if that sounds good.
Yep, sounds
Julie,
good.
if you don't mind sharing those.
Sure. Allison asked, is there a breakdown of the job numbers by industry? Like, for example, which ones have the most and the least jobs?
There is. And if you go to wherever my, when the jobs report comes out, that job report page, which you can pretty much find anywhere on the internet, will tell you what sectors are hiring more heavily than others. In most recent months, it's been healthcare, IT, and management, in the financial management areas. Those have been the heavier ones. I don't think they really share too much on what's not. I think they really want to show where the areas are where people can navigate to get jobs rather than to stay away from jobs.
Okay, the next one, and you can chime in the chat or unmute yourself if you need more information on an answer. But that was a good answer, Joanna. Thank you. Our next question is, have a job fall in your lap? I've had this happen. Is there a way to facilitate it happening more often? Kate asked that.
Having a job fall in your lap is a fabulous feeling. I think that keeping yourself, what's the word I'm going to look for? Adaptable is the best scenario. So for instance, in my work, we were told by our employer that if you're flexible and adaptable, you will always have an employment position, because at the end of the day, they want to know that you're not a single channel person. So if you're capable of expanding your reach outside of what you normally do, it will lend itself to more opportunities falling in your lap or becoming available to you. And it also helps. There's the word portfolio building is not only just about the pieces that you create, it's actually about the skills that you gather. So if you're in contract work and you're doing small piecework, that's all portfolio building. You're getting experiences in different areas that are helping to grow you as a professional. So keeping yourself flexible and adaptable is the best way to have exposure to those pieces. And networking, which we'll talk in another sector.
Okay, we've got another question from Kate. What if people try to lowball you because of your region, like saying, I live in this specific city in this specific state?
I think you have to ask yourself, is really that the job for you? Honestly, it's a personal choice. And salaries we'll talk about in the third segment. There's a whole section on salary. I believe that you have to have some level of integrity for yourself. And if you believe that your worth is more than what they're offering you, unless you're destitute, another opportunity will come your way. And I think it's better you can always try to negotiate. But to be honest with you, that's, again, a conversation for another, the third section. But, there are ways of working around that. I just feel like if people lowball you, you weren't meant to be there in the first place. That's just my personal opinion.
Right, because I've seen offers or like postings that say compensation dependent on region or, things like that. So it's not necessarily like a personal lowball, but just indicating that they pay you differently based on where you are.
I think that thank you for clarifying that. I think like if you're a person, let's say, who lives in California, the cost of living in California is way higher than maybe living in Florida. Well, maybe we're equal now, Florida and California. But, if you live in Oklahoma, you might not have the same expense. So they don't feel that they need to pay you the same level of someone. It's unfair. I'm not saying it's fair. But that's probably why in some states, if you have read, have to publish their salary requirements. I think New York is one of them. California is another. There's a few others that have to publish. I think maybe Colorado does too. But yeah, I find that sometimes they write these things. And again, we'll go over salaries, because if they give you a range, there's a way to work around that. There's a way to have that discussion without really focusing too heavily on your location. You want to tell them what your value is, and that's what you're wanting to get paid for, is not your location. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, we've got 3 more questions. Allison asks, can you give an example of including names in a SAR?
Why would we want to put names in a SAR? Are we talking about project names or people names?
Yeah, I think it was just on the slide, and one of the bullet points it said provide as much details as possible, including like names and dates. And so I was wondering what names would look like in that, because it seemed a little awkward to be like, my manager, Jen Kopp, said this.
Well, the name would not necessarily go into the final production of the SAR, but it would lend itself whether or not, let's say, your manager gave you the project, or you worked with your manager to work on something. So the name specifically, Joe Smith, would not show up in your SAR, but the way, if you looked at the final product that I had shown in the 2 different examples, it nowhere mentioned anybody's name, and I would not suggest putting in a name. But when I'm collecting the data, I need to know who you're working with, because if I don't, then you could be working with me and we have nothing to do with each other. So essentially, we want to give as much credence to how you got the project, who you worked with, and then we can craft whether you're working with a team, where you work one-on-one with the CEO, that sort of thing. That's where it would become relevant and become a little more credible in terms of how you work, because stakeholder communications is big. It's a big thing. Does that help?
Yes, thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay, we've got 1 more question from Allison. How do you feel about using grids to organize your resume? Do ATS systems have a hard time with them?
So any kind of information separators, text boxes, grids, all of that, it doesn't collect the data. It just doesn't. It comes up blank. So I have done testing with some hiring managers who use the system, and I've been in a training session with them, and they show us what the results look like. So if you use any of these enhancements to kind of parse out your data, I would advise you to find another method to using it, because it is going to erase. So the last thing you want to do is put so much time and effort into showcasing your achievements and anything else you've accomplished, and then find out that it comes up blank and then disqualifies you. So if you got that one hiring manager that is not looking at the resumes after they go through the system, then you're not going to get a phone call about having an interview. I think you're better off using a very plain word system. Don't go too far into the details of, making it pretty. You just want to deliver up your information. If you have some specific needs in terms of how you're displaying your information, and you would like to contact me and ask me specifically or show me what you have, I'm happy to look at that for you and then give you some suggestions.
Great, thanks again.
Okay, we've got another one from Kate. Resume/LinkedIn bio. Should we write in first or third person?
Well, I get a little weird about the whole third person business. I feel like it's odd. I don't use any pronouns in my work at all. I don't say I did this or I did that or we did this or that. I don't do any of that. I write very generically, and I write always with action verbs, achieve this, garnered that, manage this. There's never any we, us, none of that, because it becomes real estate that you need for something else. So if you can parse that out and make it more of a generic statement of your achievement, you're ahead of the curve. You don't need to be in first or third person at all. You just need to state the fact.
All right. I think that was our last question. that we
All
had
right, I'm going to
received.
show that last slide if you're okay with that.
Yeah, please do.
All right, so this slide is only going to be shown this evening because if you weren't here next week, if you didn't come to all three, you would not be participating in this. So I am going to share my screen again. We're having a contest for the participants that show up for all three of these sessions.
Quick thing, is your screen showing?
Is it showing? No, yes, no.
Oh,
Now, yes.
yes, now it is. Perfect. Okay, thank you. Sorry, go
Okay.
ahead.
Thank you, Innovation. Okay, thank you. So the career contest is basically to award someone who has sat with us for this entire program, all three workshop pieces, really taking in the information. We will have the team at STC pick a name out of a hat. And basically one person will be chosen to get a free resume and cover letter written by me and whatever they're looking to do. So in order to qualify, you have to be live and participating in all three pillars of this workshop. And you must drop your name in the chat, in the chat each week. So if you would do that now, the ladies will pick that up and then we'll keep track along with the people who signed up and paid for their admission into this program. And as soon as the program is over, we'll make an announcement and basically I'll contact whoever the winner is and we'll get to working. So good luck to whoever wins that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Joanna. I immediately know Kate is like in it to win it. I can see the look on her face.
All right.
So thanks for giving us a little bit of extra time because I know there was a lot of great material to cover. So just a last couple of slides as to close out. We do request feedback if you have anything you want to tell us about STC Florida, how the chapter's doing, our program, etc. There is an anonymous form if you have anything you want to share with us. Of course, you are always welcome to reach out to Julia and I. We are on our Discord. We're available by email. You can email all of our leadership at STC at adco at STC Florida. So please, we are happy to stay in touch. So glad you were here. Thank you so much for coming. Huge round of virtual applause for Joanna. I'm sorry, that's the only thing you don't get as much of the feeling of applause, in a virtual space, but we want to offer it. We're so grateful for your time and your energies, and we're looking forward to next week. So thank you all so much.
Thank you for joining me. I'm very honored. I appreciate your time tonight.
Yeah, hopefully I'll see all of you soon.
All right, take care, everyone. Thank you so much. Night.
All right. Yeah, lots of great feedback in the chat for you, Joanna.
Bethany, I have a stupid question.
Yeah, not at all.
Are the